Hello, crafty friends. This is Anya General with Ink, Paper, Scissors. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to show you how to create your own backgrounds in just 5 easy steps. These techniques are incredibly fun and versatile, and once you get going, it's hard to stop. I ended up making 13 cards for this video, and honestly, I could have made even more if I had the time. That's how enjoyable and inspiring this process is. Now, I know some of these backgrounds might look a little intimidating at first glance, especially if you're newer to mixed media or layering techniques. But I promise we're going to take it step by step together. I'll walk you through each part of the process so you'll feel confident and comfortable creating these kinds of backgrounds in your own craft room. If you've been meaning to use some of those stamps and stencils in your stash, or maybe you've collected sprays, pastes, or even texture mediums you haven't touched in a while, this is the perfect opportunity to put them to good use. Whenever I work on these types of projects, I always like to make a big batch of backgrounds all at once. Even if I don't use them all right away, I can come back to them later and turn them into quick cards. So I highly encourage you to carve out a few hours, pull out those supplies you've been meaning to try, and just play. Before we dive in, take a second to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I share new videos every Thursday, packed with card-making ideas, techniques, and inspiration to keep you crafting all week long. I've also linked all the supplies I used today down below in the video description, as well as in my visual supply list and on my blog. And if you decide to purchase any of the supplies I mention, I'd be so grateful if you used my affiliate links. They don't cost you anything extra, but they do help support my channel and allow me to keep bringing you free content like this. Alright, with all that said, let's jump right in and start creating some beautiful backgrounds. I'm starting out with watercolor cardstock as the base for my backgrounds. For today's project, I'm using 2 sheets of Strathmore Bristol smooth paper, which is one of my go-to favorites. That said, you can use just about any watercolor paper you have on hand for this technique. If you're not planning on using a lot of water, you could even use 80-pound cardstock. Just make sure it's a decent quality that can handle a bit of layering without warping. The reason I chose watercolor paper for this project is because I wanted my surface to hold up to whatever I decided to throw at it, whether it's water, sprays, pastes, or inks. When I'm working in a more experimental or layered way like this, I want to be able to play without worrying if the paper can keep up. Watercolor paper gives me that peace of mind. Now let's talk about paper types for a second. 2 of my favorite options for this kind of project are Bristol Smooth and Tim Holtz watercolor paper. I tend to reach for these because I don't always want a lot of texture showing through my background. That texture in watercolor paper is often referred to as the tooth, and it can be beautiful, but sometimes it interferes with stamping or stenciling. Bristol Smooth has very little to no tooth at all. It's considered ultra smooth and feels a lot like regular cardstock, just much thicker and sturdier. It blends beautifully and works well with both wet and dry mediums. Tim Holtz watercolor paper, on the other hand, is really versatile because it has 2 sides, one smooth and one textured, so you can choose the surface depending on the look and feel you want. If you want crisper stamped images or smoother blends, just use the smooth side. If you like more texture and organic effects, use the textured side. For today's session, I cut my watercolor paper down to 5.5 inches by 11 inches and 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. These sizes give me a lot of flexibility and room to play, but honestly, you can cut your paper down to any size you like. It really depends on what kinds of panels you want to end up with. If you want to work directly with an A2 panel, you absolutely can. Just keep in mind that working smaller from the beginning may slow you down a little, especially when we get into layering and adding multiple textures. Later in the video, I'll show you exactly why starting with larger sheets can speed up your workflow and give you more creative freedom. It also gives you the ability to trim down or crop your favorite sections to fit different card sizes. So whether you're starting big or small, choose what works best for you and your process. And let's get started. Let's start with step 1, brayering. This is where the magic begins, and it's a great way to quickly lay down vibrant, layered color. I'm working with 2 panels measuring 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, basically the size of a full sheet of cardstock cut in half horizontally. I've also pulled out some of my favorite ink colors and of course a brayer. For this technique, it really helps to use full-size ink pads. Mini ink cubes don't give you enough surface area to properly load up your brayer, and that can make the inking process slower and a bit uneven. Today, I'm using Catherine Pooler inks. They're nice and juicy, which means I can get bold, saturated color down quickly. I'm working with a few different color palettes, and I'll walk you through each one. I'm starting with Fiesta Blue, followed by Flirty Fuchsia. I load up my brayer by rolling it directly across the ink pad several times, and then I start transferring the color to my paper. Don't worry about being precise here. The goal is simply to cover your paper with color. I roll in different directions, overlapping layers, and just letting the color build organically. This part is really about play and movement, not perfection. You'll notice in this footage that one of my brayers isn't working quite right. The ink is going down unevenly, and the surface looks patchy. That's actually a great teaching moment. I decided to leave that footage in so you can see what a bad brayer result looks like. If you ever notice your ink isn't transferring smoothly, it could be a sign that your brayer is old, worn down, or just not rolling evenly. Thankfully, that's an easy fix. I simply went over it again with a different brayer and continued layering. Next, I bring in something borrowed, another bold Catherine Pooler blue, and continue adding layers. I also cycle back through Fiesta Blue and Flirty Fuchsia, using them to fill in any areas that feel a little flat or unbalanced. You really just want to create a mix of 3 main colors across your panel. Don't worry about how it looks right now. It's not supposed to look like a finished design. You're just creating a vibrant, colorful foundation that we'll build on in later steps. Now I move on to a lighter, more serene palette. For this set, I'm using Tranquil, Wintergreen, Minted, and Cummerbund. I start with Tranquil, which is a beautiful soft blue, then layer in Cummerbund and Wintergreen. These lighter shades give a very different mood, more ethereal and dreamy. Just a reminder here, always clean your brayer between colors, or use a different brayer for each one. If you don't, you can contaminate your ink pads, and that's never fun. Once I laid down those lighter shades, I felt like my backgrounds were still a little too pale for what I had in mind, so I brought in Minted and On the Lake, both a bit deeper and richer, to give more contrast and variation. The key is to listen to what your background needs and adjust as you go. This technique is so forgiving. There's no wrong way to do it. Then I shift into a pink and purple palette, repeating the same process with Serenade, Pucker Up, Sweet 16, and Do-Si-Do. These colors are soft but cheerful and blend beautifully together. At the very end, I decided to pull in Tranquil one more time, just to add a bit more purple to balance the panel. These subtle color shifts really help add depth. I decided to keep all this footage in, even though the process is repetitive, in case you want to craft along with me. I know sometimes it's helpful to see every step and not just the highlights, especially when you're trying a new technique. So feel free to pause the video and ink along at your own pace. This is your time to experiment and have fun with color. Personally, I find this technique totally addicting. I like to think of it as the free spirit technique, because there are no rules here. You can truly do anything on your background, follow your instincts, and it's still going to turn out beautiful and uniquely yours. It's a process that really lets your creativity shine. Now we're moving on to step 2, which is stamping. This step is where we start to build visual interest and layer in more personality onto our backgrounds. For this part, you can use any stamps you have in your collection. That's the beauty of this technique. Background stamps, floral stamps, script stamps, even sentiments, they all work. I'm starting out with sentiment stamps because I love the effect of having words softly layered into the background. For this example, I'm using a brand new stamp set by Gina Designs called Birthday Wishes. I begin by aligning several sentiments from this set directly onto my panel. Then I pull additional birthday sentiments from other Gina Designs stamp sets and carefully position them side by side to fill the entire background. This process takes a little patience, especially when you're laying out a whole cluster of stamps, but it's worth the effort. Think of it like creating your own custom background stamp using a mix of sentiments. Once I have all my stamps placed exactly where I want them, I pick them up with the lid of my MISTI so I can stamp them all at once. For ink, I'm using white pigment ink, which adds a beautiful soft overlay to the background. I've been alternating between Hero Arts and Altenews Cloud White pigment inks. The only reason I'm switching between the two is that my Altenew ink pad happens to be a little more moist right now. But truly, any white pigment ink will work for this technique. I stamped the sentiments twice to make sure they're nice and crisp, and the result is so subtle and pretty. As the pigment ink dries, it lightens slightly, creating an almost ghosted look that blends beautifully with the background. I repeat this stamping process on 4 different panels to create a consistent theme across several cards. Next, I move on to using some other types of stamps. I start with a brand new stamp from Gina Designs called Pin Dot Background. I ink up just a corner of the stamp using Flirty Fuchsia and stamp it in several different places on my panel. This gives you a tone-on-tone effect. It's soft, subtle, and adds a bit of texture without overpowering the design. From there, I bring in the Wild Blossom stamp by Gina and pull just the leaf stamps off the backing sheet. I place the leaf stamp into my MISTI and center it on my panel, then ink it up with something borrowed and stamp it down. I love this kind of monochromatic stamping. It blends right into the background while still adding interest. On a green panel, I repeat the same process, but this time using the color minted for a cohesive tone-on-tone look. Then I grab the script stamp from the Parisian Charm set by Gina Designs and ink it up with On the Lake. I stamp it randomly across the panel, sometimes off the edges, sometimes closer to the center, to add a layer of organic text that feels aged and elegant. Script stamps are always a great way to add visual texture to a background without making it too busy. Next, I reach for the Beautiful Patterns stamp set. I ink up one of the pattern blocks using It's a Boy and then stamp it randomly over my panel. I switch to a different pattern from the same set and repeat the process, layering in soft geometric shapes for extra depth. Then I switch over to one of my blue-purple panels and use the same stamp set, but this time with white pigment ink, specifically Altenews Cloud White. Again, this creates a totally different look. The pigment ink sits on top of the darker background, creating a faded, dreamy contrast that really changes the mood of the panel. This stamping method gives you two distinct effects depending on the ink. Dye inks will blend more with your background, giving that tone-on-tone feel, while pigment inks sit on top of the paper and remain more visible. Both have their place, and I love mixing them up to see what results I get. I repeat this process on several more panels before moving on to the next step. The next step is ink blending. For this step, I'm using dye inks and distress oxides interchangeably, depending on the effect I want. Here, I'm starting with the Fizzy Stencil and Broken China Distress Oxide ink, and I'm simply ink blending the circular pattern in several areas on my panel. This gives me some subtle movement and visual texture. I chose oxide ink here because it has unique properties. Unlike dye ink, oxides sit on top of the paper, which means they're more opaque and give you a much softer, more velvety finish. That slight chalky look can really transform a background. After that, I jump back into stamping. I start with the Music Medley background stamp by Gina K Designs, using Aquatini ink for a dark green effect. Then I reach for the double background 1 stamp by Gina K. I ink up just part of it with Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide ink and stamp it onto one of my blue-green panels. The goal here is to keep building layers, one subtle element at a time. Now it's already time for the next step. Distress sprays, or more specifically, distress spritzes. These add a beautiful, shimmery shine to your panels and really elevate the background. Before I spray, I make sure to shake the bottles really well, usually for a couple of minutes, because the mica settles at the bottom. You want that shimmer evenly mixed for the best results. I also place a paper towel underneath my panel to catch any overspray. On my blue-green panel, I'm starting with Uncharted Mariner. Just 2 to 3 light sprays are all you need to get that gorgeous effect. Then, on my blue-purple background, I layer a mix of wilted violet, picked raspberry, peacock feathers, and another mist of Uncharted Mariner for a vibrant, multi-toned shine. For my green-blue background, I spray peeled paint, twisted citron, and a touch of picked raspberry to add some contrast. These sprays dry fairly quickly, within just a few minutes, so once they're set, we're ready to move on to the next step. The final step in creating our backgrounds is also one of the most exciting: paste. This is where we add texture and dimension, and it really takes everything to the next level. Today, I'm using a variety of pastes, and I encourage you to experiment with whatever you have in your craft stash. Some pastes will be translucent, while others might be more opaque, white, or even metallic like silver or gold. Each type gives a slightly different result, so play around and see what works best with your background. Before jumping in, I wanted to give you a quick look at how sparkly and gorgeous my background is after the Distress Spritz sprays have fully dried. That shimmer adds such a magical effect, and it's only going to get better with texture on top. To begin, I'm using Gina K's Glitz Glitter Gel in the color white, which is one of my go-to pastes for adding sparkle without overpowering the background. I pair it with the decorative double stencil and apply it using a palette knife. Mine happens to be from Crafter's Companion, but you can use any palette knife or even a craft spatula, whatever you're comfortable with. I scoop out a bit of the glitz glitter gel and spread it over the stencil, then scrape off the excess and reuse it in another area on the panel. When you see the final card designs later on, you'll recognize this pattern. It's the one created with the glitz glitter gel and decorative double stencil. Next, I switch over to the Bodacious Blooms stencil, again using the same white glitz glitter gel, and later I pull in the fizzy stencil to repeat the process on a few other panels. You can absolutely experiment with different colors of glitter gel, but I chose to stick with white and translucent pastes today so they would coordinate with the colorful backgrounds without clashing or overpowering them. And here's a quick tip that's really helped me keep my pastes from drying out. After you're done using your paste, place a piece of press and seal over the opening of the jar before screwing the lid back on. This creates an extra seal and helps preserve the moisture and texture of your paste for a lot longer. It's a simple trick, but it makes a big difference. And with that, our backgrounds are complete, layered, textured, colorful, and ready to be turned into stunning cards. Now I'm going to show you how I create a few more panels, following the same steps I outlined earlier. You'll see just how quick and easy it is to create stunning backgrounds once you get going. I may jump around a little between steps here, and that's intentional. I want to show you that you don't have to follow every single step in order to get a beautiful result. Hopefully, watching this part of my process will give you the confidence to make it your own. Let's start with one of my pink panels. I begin by die cutting the Rose Mini Slimline die out of white cardstock, and I'm actually using that die cut as a stencil. With Gina K's medium orchid ink, I ink blend roses all over the panel. I'm using Post-it notes to mask off the edges so the ink stays only within the rose cutouts. This is such a fun way to stretch your dies and get more from your supplies. Next, I bring in Lisa Horton's solid gold ink and the Music Medley background stamp from Gina K Designs. I lightly stamp some gold music notes over the panel in a few areas, adding shine and visual movement. Then I stamp the rose lace background stamp, also from Gina, over the entire panel using pucker up ink for a soft tone-on-tone floral layer. To finish off this panel, I add a few sprays of worn lipstick and wilted violet distress mica spritz. Once that dries, this panel is complete, textured, sparkly, and full of layered detail. Moving on to one of my blue-purple backgrounds that I had previously created with the brayer technique. I cut it in half, which gives me 2 new panels to work with. For the first one, I place it into my MISTI and align the pin dot background stamp. I use Lisa Horton's Silver Shine ink and stamp it over the entire panel, creating a soft metallic texture. Then I repeat the same process with the second panel, but this time using Lisa Horton's solid gold ink for a warmer tone. Now I start layering in more stenciling. I take the Foliage stencil by Gina K and use blue raspberry ink to add leafy details. Then I bring in the Lush Leaves stencil with that same ink to reinforce the layered look. After that, I use the Fizzy stencil and medium orchid ink to create another layer of subtle pattern and color. To finish off this panel, I grab the decorative double stencil again and apply Gina's Glitz Glitter Gel. A touch of sparkle to bring everything together. All of these layers work in harmony to create a background that's full of interest without feeling crowded. Now it's time to move on to the second panel from earlier. For this one, I'm using the Masks and Fillers stencil and applying Spectrum Noir glitter paste in Silver Moon. I used 2 patterns from the stencil, the dots and the lines, and applied the paste in 2 areas. This one turned out to be one of my favorite panels. It's such a good example of how you don't have to use all 5 steps to get a gorgeous result. Even just 3 well-chosen elements, like color, texture, and a hint of shimmer, can make a panel feel complete. To wrap this panel up, I add a few light spritzes of Uncharted Mariner and worn lipstick, and then it's ready to go. Now I'm moving on to one of my blue-green panels that was drying after the distress sprays. I start by grabbing the gauze background stamp from Gina K and inking it up with Mint to Be. I stamp that across the panel, then repeat the same process using the color Frosted for some variation. These soft blue-greens create a nice, textured foundation. Then I bring in one of my favorite products, Glass Bead Glitter Gel. This paste dries completely translucent, so you only see shimmer and sparkle where you apply it. I spread it through the Lush Leaves stencil, and because I want a lot of sparkle on this one, I go big. I cover the entire panel and then set it aside to dry. Now, let's talk about turning these backgrounds into finished cards. I'll walk you through this part quickly, because these backgrounds are so detailed that they really don't need much else to become showstoppers. For the sentiments, I stamp out several from the Birthday Wishes stamp set by Gina K and die cut them all at once. This set is such a great one to have. It includes a wide variety of birthday greetings in different fonts and sizes, so you're covered no matter what kind of card you're making. For this card, I trimmed my panel to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches in order to leave a nice border when mounted on an A2 card base. I colored the birthday cake with my Copic markers and adhered it with dimensions centered to my card front. And that's it. With all the color, texture, stamping, shimmer, and paste, the background does most of the work. On this next card, the panel measures 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. This is the panel with only the braying, the Spectrum Noir Silver Moon paste, and the pin dot stamp. I added glitter peel-offs to the edges of the panel to give the card a finished look. Then I added 2 butterflies from the Treasured Kittens stamp set by Gina, and the card is complete. On this card, the panel measures 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I glued the panel diagonally on my card base and added glitter peel-offs to the edges of the panel to give the panel a finished look. Then I die cut a few hearts from silver glitter cardstock with the heart chain die by Gina K and glued them around the sentiment on the card. This is a card that has Gina K Glitz glitter gel on the card front, which is not fully translucent. It's beautiful and sparkly. I stamped out the birds from the Celebrate You stamp and popped them up with foam squares for dimension. Then I added a few hearts to give the card a finished look. This panel measured 2 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I cut 1/4 inch of each side and glued it centered onto the card front. Then I added silver glitter peel-offs to give the card some extra sparkle. I die cut stars from silver glitter cardstock with the rectangle single stitch die set. The flower and firefly is from the Celebrate You stamp. This panel measures 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I die cut the leaves out of white cardstock with the foliage fillers dies. I adhered them to the card front with foam squares for dimension. This card turned out to be one of my favorites. I stamped and heat embossed the floral from the Lovely Flower stamp onto vellum. Then I adhered the vellum behind the sentiment to the card front. This is the card with the glass bead glitter gel. You can see how translucent and sparkly this gel dries. It's stunning. I die cut all the feathers out of white cardstock from the Fancy Feathers die set and adhered them to the card front. For this card, I stamped and heat embossed with clear embossing powder 2 of the flowers and the firefly from the Celebrate You stamp. Then I popped them up with foam strips for dimension. On this card, the panel measures 2½ inches by 5½ inches. I adhered it diagonally on my card front and added silver glitter peel-offs by Love from Lizzie to give the card a finished look. I die cut the heart chain from silver glitter cardstock with the heart chain die set. This is another card made with the glass bead glitter gel. The panel measures 2¼ inches by 5½ inches. I finished this card with glitter peel-offs and added a butterfly from the Celebrate You stamp. The panel on this card measures 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I heat embossed the leaves onto vellum with Gina K white embossing powder. The leaf stamp is from the Gentle Silhouettes stamp. I added dots of glue behind the leaves to adhere it to my card front. The panel on this card measures 3½ inches by 5½ inches. To give the panel a finished look, I adhered glitter peel-offs next to the panel. The butterfly is from the Celebrate You stamp. And that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed seeing how easy and fun it can be to create your own stunning backgrounds using just a few techniques layered together. Whether you follow all 5 steps or just pick your favorites, I really encourage you to play, experiment, and make it your own. If you found this video helpful or inspiring, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a new project. I share fresh ideas and techniques every single week. And while you're at it, go ahead and tap that notification bell so YouTube lets you know when I post something new. I've also listed all the products I used today down below in the description box, along with links to my blog where you'll find pictures of all these cards. And if you'd like to support my channel, please consider using my affiliate links when you shop. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but I receive a small commission that helps me continue creating and sharing videos like this one with you. Also, let me know in the comment section which card was your favorite and whether you will give these techniques a try. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, and until next time, happy crafting!